On this Monday night, keeping Canada secure. The key issue ahead of the NATO summit and the ominous message from Russia's defense minister. Israel's deadly raid of a refugee camp in the West Bank.
It was like World War III.
The attack the Palestinian Prime Minister calls a war crime. Public health warnings in some holiday hotspots.
I've had to be more careful.
New anxiety over malaria spreading in the U.S., why it could become more common. And booming business.
The pendulum has swung the other way.
How the Indigenous tourism industry is taking off.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with global developments that could directly impact security here in Canada. NATO members are preparing to gather next weekend in the Baltic country of Lithuania. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will join other world leaders for what could be one of NATO's most consequential summits. On the agenda, recent unrest in the Russian military, new Nordic members of the alliance, and a new focus on Arctic security. David Akin has our top story tonight.
The HMCS Shawinigan and HMCS Summerside began a 4-month mission Monday that will take them to the North Atlantic and Baltic Sea on a NATO mine countermeasures operation.
This is just part of Canada's contribution and decision made about the kind of force mix that we can send.
The departure of the Canadian Navy ships is part of a busy week of activity ahead of the NATO summit in the Lithuanian capital of Vilnius. On Monday, Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu seemed to have a warning for Canada and other NATO allies when he boasted of destroying what he called the weapons of the West in use in Ukraine. The Vilnius meeting will be the first NATO summit with Finland as a full NATO ally. There were hopes that Sweden, too, would participate as a full member, but its accession, which was quickly approved by Canada, is still blocked by Turkey. NATO would become significantly stronger with the addition of Swedish forces, particularly its submarine fleet, which includes the most advanced non-nuclear subs in the world. And both Sweden and Finland have significant resources to help improve Arctic security, an issue that Canadian MPs and senators say is a crucial issue for this country.
Our interests now have become more conjoined as both Canada's Arctic and the European Arctic are engaging head-on with significant military threats and geopolitical threats.
For NATO, it's quite important to have now the whole northern part. To see it as a whole piece and not with the former NATO nations, Norway and Denmark. Now we have a whole block, and thinking about for potential defense plans, it's for us a huge step forward.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will join his NATO and Arctic counterparts in Vilnius early next week. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Ukraine says its troops are making progress against Russian forces along eastern and southern fronts. This footage released by Ukrainian soldiers is said to show troops storming operations near Bakhmut. Kyiv says its military took back more than 37 square kilometers of eastern territory over the past week. In the south, Ukraine says it's regained more than 28 square kilometers of territory. Russia claims it thwarted a Ukrainian plot to kill the Moscow-backed head of Crimea. A Russian ex-arms dealer freed last December in a high-profile prisoner swap is running for office as a member of a far-right political party. Victor Bout, once dubbed the Merchant of Death by the U.S., will attempt to win a seat in a Russian regional legislature. He was released in a prisoner exchange with U.S. basketball star Brittany Griner after serving 10 years of a 25-year sentence. The U.S. Justice Department described him as one of the world's most prolific arms dealers who has sold weapons to terrorists around the world for decades. And the U.S. is recommending American travelers rethink going to China over increased risk of wrongful detention. A new travel advisory warns U.S. citizens in China could face exit bans or be detained without access to consular services or information about their alleged crime. It also says Chinese authorities could deem a wide range of documents and data as state secrets to prosecute for espionage. The warning comes after Beijing passed tough new counter-espionage and foreign relations laws last week. Israeli forces have launched a huge raid on a refugee camp inside the occupied West Bank. The Israeli government says its armed forces could spend days completing the deadly military operation. The onslaught began early this morning on Jenin in the northern West Bank. It involved drone strikes, bulldozers, and hundreds of Israeli troops. At least 8 Palestinians have been killed, with dozens more injured. Israel says it's targeting militants, while Palestinians call the operation a war crime against a defenseless people. Redmond Shannon reports.
The sound of drones and explosions over the occupied West Bank, followed by hundreds of Israeli troops storming into Jenin refugee camp, Israel's biggest operation there in 2 decades. Those killed already labelled as martyrs by the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammad Shtayyeh says the raid is a crime, calling it an attempt to erase the camp and displace its innocent residents, something Israel denies. Despite its name, the Jenin camp is far from temporary. It was set up 70 years ago for Palestinian refugees displaced by the first war of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Today, the half a square kilometre camp is home to 14,000 people. Israel's armed forces call it a hornet's nest for militants who operate outside the control of the Palestinian Authority.
We're focused on destabilising and stopping the infrastructure of terrorism inside the camp. Command centres, weapons.
As gun battles continued throughout the day, the Israeli Defence Forces shared a photo of what they claim are explosives kept under a mosque. There was an escalation in violence last month. 4 Israeli civilians were shot dead near a West Bank Jewish settlement shortly after 7 Palestinians were killed in another raid on Jenin. Israel says the operation will last as long as it takes.
We don't have a fight with the Palestinians. Actually, our fight is with the proxies of Iran.
Hamas and Islamic Jihad are militant groups with connections to Iran. Both have already suggested there will be revenge attacks. And with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu leading Israel's most right-leaning government in its history, any progress on peace seems like a distant prospect. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
It seems there is some calm in France today. The police killing of a teen sparked days of protests and violence that saw a French politician's family attacked. Today, a rally was held in support of Vincent Jeanbrun, the mayor of a Parisian suburb. His wife and one of his children were injured when rioters attacked their home. There have been more than 2,000 arrests since police fatally shot 17-year-old Nael Merzouk during a traffic stop last week, sparking nationwide anger over systemic racism. The UK recorded its hottest June since record-keeping began in 1884. According to Britain's Meteorological Office, average temperatures hit nearly 16 degrees Celsius last month. That beats a joint record set in 1940 and 1976 by almost a degree. It's about 2.5 degrees above the usual June average. The hottest UK day last month was 32.2 degrees. Typical max temperatures for June hover around the low 20s. Experts say scorching hot temperatures in the U.S. may be to blame for rare outbreaks of malaria. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control has issued a public health warning about the spread of the mosquito-borne illness. Several locally transmitted cases have been reported in Florida and Texas. Jackson Proskow reports.
Summer means mosquito season. This year, the insects may be more than just a nuisance. In some American vacation hotspots, they may be carrying malaria.
It's a concern because malaria is a life-threatening disease. It's not often seen in the United States, and we haven't seen it domestically acquired in over 20 years.
In Florida and Texas, a small number of locally transmitted cases have now been reported. The only thing they have in common is that they are not linked to travel.
It is a little alarming to have a disease that we've eliminated from the United States and then have these few local cases. But they are a few cases.
Malaria is a parasite carried by certain mosquitoes. It's most common in Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. Globally, it's responsible for about 600,000 deaths per year, though symptoms are most often mild.
It feels like a really bad flu. However, some people go on to develop complications.
Florida's Terra Cia Island lies near where some of the cases were detected. It's where residents are now taking extra precautions.
I've had to be more careful using mosquito repellent, which I never used to do.
Researchers warn malaria's spread may be part of a new normal as climate change takes hold.
Even small changes in temperature, rainfall, humidity can lead to these diseases being transmitted in new altitudes and new latitudes.
All of the patients infected in the U.S. have been treated and are said to be improving. The Centers for Disease Control is urging doctors to treat future cases as a medical emergency in a season full of outdoor gatherings and favorable conditions for mosquitoes. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Back in Ottawa, Canadians with disabilities will receive a boost from the federal government. Known as the Canada Disability Benefit Act, it's meant to provide financial support to low-income disabled people in Canada. As Mackenzie Gray reports, while the new legislation is sparking hope, a lack of details leaves plenty of questions.
Today, we are literally making history. Merci. Merci.
It was billed as a landmark moment, a new Canadian disability benefit passing Parliament last week.
This benefit is the culmination of the work of every self-advocate, every activist, every parent, every ally, every organization, everyone who has fought to have disability rights recognized.
The benefit will be modeled after the Guaranteed Income Supplement, but the bill itself lacks crucial details, like how much money recipients will get and how many of the 6.2 million Canadians with a disability will be eligible.
Do you want to go to the water park at home?
Yeah.
One of the people hoping to get the benefit is Jay Woodruff. He's been working with the NDP and has petitioned Parliament to bring in the payment, but he's disappointed with the bill.
There's a lot of celebration going on, but there's nothing to celebrate. It's an IOU with no budget, no eligibility. It's helping no one.
Woodruff has a number of autoimmune diseases, including rheumatoid arthritis, that makes basic tasks like walking a major challenge. And as his condition deteriorates, he wonders what that will mean for his 4-year-old daughter, Octavia.
There's severe struggle with the fact that she's going to outpace me. Having progressive diseases means I'm only going to get worse. So I'm going to most likely be in a wheelchair.
Woodruff's also worried the new federal proposal could mean provincial and insurance benefits might be clawed back, leaving disabled Canadians no better off. That led Senator Mary Lou McPhedran to try and amend the bill, but the Liberals rejected it.
By not accepting the Senate amendment, we're going to have insurance companies getting richer and poor people with disabilities getting poorer.
Despite the lack of details, many advocates have applauded the government for attempting to help disabled Canadians. But the hope is this isn't the only federal support to aid the nearly 1.5 million Canadians with a disability that live below the poverty line.
This bill will certainly help, but it's not the end-all and be-all. There's a lot of other work that needs to be done to help more people with disabilities and a growing number of people with disabilities in our country live with dignity and respect.
We asked Carla Qualtro's office for an interview and she wasn't made available, but she did tell the Globe and Mail that the first disability benefit payment won't come until the end of 2024. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Ottawa.
Roller coasters can be pretty intimidating, but one ride is raising red flags. We'll show you why coming up. Plus, torrential rain in the Windy City, how flash floods brought parts of Chicago to a halt. And a Canadian diving daredevil takes the plunge at an international competition. Today, crews are inspecting a roller coaster at a North Carolina theme park after a large crack was spotted in a support beam. The ride was shut down Friday night. A man who had just gone on the roller coaster with his family recorded this alarming video. You can see the support beam shift outwards as a car full of people rounds the curve. The coaster has a peak of nearly 110 meters and reaches speeds of up to 152 kilometers per hour. Parts of Chicago's popular Riverwalk are closed today due to flooding. City crews reversed the flow of the Chicago River to ease flooding downtown. As much as 23 centimeters of rain fell in the region yesterday, prompting several flood warnings. Some highways were shut down and nearly a dozen vehicles were stranded. The last half of an Xfinity Series NASCAR race was canceled because of the conditions. Cultural connection ahead, the evolution and rising popularity of Indigenous tourism. Summer is a time many of us try to get out and explore. This year, though, inflation is putting pressure on those travel dollars, meaning many people may stay closer to home. One of those homegrown experiences is the opportunity to explore the rich history, heritage, and diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples across Canada. And as Melissa Ridgen explains, there's evidence Canadians are more than ever interested in supporting Indigenous businesses.
As an Indigenous woman, we've always been taught that we have a special connection to the water, and my sisters and I really believe that by doing the work that we do, by giving people lessons, teaching them the skills, bringing them down to the water, we're increasing people's connection to the water.
It's that connection that inspires many Indigenous tourism operators, sharing long-held teachings and ways with others living on or visiting their territory. Jennifer Redsky and her sisters run Toronto's Osha on the shore of Lake Ontario. Paddleboarding, kayaking, and yoga are some of the activities they offer with a message to clients.
Their relationship to the water, how they treat the water, and how they protect it alongside us, because it's all of our responsibilities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
Outdoor adventures, Northern Lights viewing, and sharing cultural celebrations are bread and butter for many Indigenous tourism operators. And growing luxury excursions like glamping, hotels and spas, and high-end food and wine.
What I've seen now in the last few years is a real genuine interest in learning something new about Canada. And I think that's where Indigenous tourism has become sort of the forefront.
The timing is perfect. A new Leger survey by food services company Sodexo shows 74% of Canadians believe Indigenous businesses help boost the Canadian economy. And 76% believe they help strengthen the country's social fabric.
It makes me feel good that the general public of Canada, want to see the history change. So we're a part of this new world, and a part of Canada. When we start talking about our interests, we can start doing a lot of great things together.
Similar surveys not that long ago showed the opposite results.
It's funny how 5 years, 6 years later, that's completely shifted. We just did another comparative assessment, and it's gone from being slightly more negative than positive to now extremely positive, closer to 90%. And so the pendulum has swung the other way.
It has the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada on track to hit its 2025 goal of $1.9 billion in direct GDP contributions and nearly 2,000 Indigenous tourism businesses operating with 40,000 employees. Operators like Jennifer Redsky hope support continues beyond Indigenous History Month.
To celebrate Indigenous people, it shouldn't be just 1 month. We are here. We've always been here, and we will continue to be here throughout the entire year and forever.
Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Man in motion. Next, 50 years later, Rick Hansen returns to the site of his life-altering accident. What a stunt, and from 21 meters high. That's Canadian diver Molly Carlson. She finished in second place at the Italian stop of the Cliff Diving World Series. The annual championship takes place at several locations around the world, with this year also including events in New Zealand, France, and Japan. Carlson sits second overall in the women's standings halfway through the 2023 season. Another Canadian athlete had a bittersweet homecoming. Rick Hansen, Canada's man in motion, traveled back to his hometown of Williams Lake, BC, 50 years after he became paralyzed due to injuries from a severe car crash. But as Travis Prasad reports, Hansen says it was the community that gave him the strength to move forward.
How are you? Good to see you, man. I was wondering where you were, and I was wanting to see you. And
shaking hands and sharing stories.
It's been a non-stop week for the man in motion as he returns to his hometown of Williams Lake.
It's just been an amazing experience. I've been able to reconnect with old friends and family.
The same people who rallied around him when he suffered a life-changing injury. June 27th marked 50 years since Rick Hansen was thrown from a pickup truck in a crash while on his way home from a fishing trip. Spinal cord damage paralyzed him from the waist down at just 15 years old.
At that time, I was really struggling to have any goals or dreams.
But he'd emerge stronger than before. First as a Paralympian, then by wheeling over 40,000 kilometers through 34 countries during his 2-year Man in Motion World Tour. It raised $26 million for spinal cord research and awareness for accessibility. His decades of humanitarian work through the Rick Hansen Foundation now being recognized in Williams Lake as he's named Honorary Parade Marshal at this weekend's Stampede.
Great opportunity for me to be able to, with pride, represent my hometown and just say thanks and celebrate the spirit of the Williams Lake Stampede and the community of Williams Lake and the surrounding region and everybody who's coming in to celebrate.
It's an honor to host Rick Hansen as Parade Marshal. He's our very own hometown hero.
Coinciding with his return, Williams Lake is committing to design all future city-owned buildings with the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification of Gold.
This is fantastic because we're turning the tap off on the barriers for everyone so everyone can go everywhere.
A trailblazer paving the way for others to reach their dreams. Travis Prasad, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is Fox Cove, Newfoundland and Labrador. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks so much for watching. Jeff Semple will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.